I'm gonna start whenever you guys are ready. Please mute your mics, and then once
I
it's your
started recording.
okay. Hello. Wait, sorry. I wanna try to record just in case. Yeah, I can't do that. Okay. Hello and welcome to our research project, Engaging Minority College Students in Higher Education, Research and Advocacy by the Muslim Student Association Research Team. We are Laela, Rozan, Maleeha, and Kushi. This is a college student-led, community-based participatory action research that is based on a partnership between education mentors and Muslim American college students. Typically, research is done by outsiders, and the research questions are designed by professional researchers. In this case, it is an entirely different model. Us Muslim women students on campus who are also members of the community developed and designed their research questions with the help of our mentors, Dr. Ravona and Dr. Wolfgram. We also conducted the research and participated in the interviews. Us four girls at one point or another were part of the MSA team on campus. And through this research, we wanted to learn more about the experience of Muslim Americans and in part to see if there's anything that can be done to improve their experiences. The religious minoritization of Muslim college students in the United States. This is a book by Shabana Mir, and she was a big inspiration to our research throughout this project. We related with some of her findings. This idea of religious minoritization is a process of making students feel like they are invisible, which frustrates their goals and experiences. This is something that Shabana Mir studied, and there are 5 factors that we found in the literature. The first one is othering and generalization. This process is the representation and promotion of negative stereotypes targeting Muslims on campus. The second is religious and gendered hypervisibility, which is the experience of increased visibility of the gendered and embodied religious practices of Muslim Americans on campus. The third is institutional invisibility, which involves the lack of institutional recognition of religious minorities, the lack of representation among faculty and in relative curriculum. The fourth is spaces of inclusion and solidarity, where Muslim American college students have been able to cultivate spaces of mutual support on campus, such as the MSA. And the last one is constructions and transformations of identity. Muslim American college students are engaged in ongoing negotiations with various aspects of their identities, including their religion, education, family, race, class, gender, sexuality, and national identity play in their daily lives. Our study goal is to identify the sociocultural and institutional factors that impact the success and experiences of Muslim American college students. And our research design is consisting of qualitative research, which at the most basic level explores the complex descriptions of how people experience a particular issue. For example, after we finished the interviews, we went through a process of coding, where we each read the transcripts and coded them. Each transcript was coded by at least 2 people. We then compared the notes and discussed our findings. We also wrote memos where we took our notes and the quotes we found and categorized them. Then we expanded on the writing. Semi-structured interviews with Muslim students was the main tool. This was supplemented by the journals we compiled. Normally in research, when you develop an interview protocol, you often base the questions on the research literature. We did more than just that. Throughout this research, we also wrote ethnographic journals where we wrote our thoughts and experiences with this research. And from these journals, we developed these research questions. Like I mentioned, this research is student-led, and we really enjoyed being able to give our input in developing the questions. Our participants were a total of 21, 18 female and 3 male. A limitation was that there was a bias towards male participants, but it might have been because we are 4 female researchers, and it was during COVID and had to be done virtually. So it was harder to get male participants, but we did try, and the age range that had the most was 18 to 22. Ethnicities, the most 2 were South Asian and Arab, given that those are the major ethnicities on campus. Of course, there are more Muslim ethnicities at Northeastern, but we were not able to capture that diversity as well. Next, we have the 5 major themes of our research.
So the 5 major themes that we found in our research are religion and identity, which is basically described as finding a balance between one's faith and their own identity. Number 2 is immigration status. Almost all of our participants are either immigrants or first-generation immigrants, which gives us a different perspective onto each interview. And number 3 is hyper-awareness and visibility, which is defined as increased alertness or being vigilant of surroundings and standing out in a crowd due to external appearance. For example, hijab, beard, or males who wear kufi. Number 4 is racist targeting, which is described as discrimination against a person on the basis of ethnicity or religion. Number 5 is pressure to represent the community. This is when someone feels as if they have to make a choice in front of others to, as they are the representative of Islam rather than making a choice on their own. So after the interviews, we transcribed them. We looked for repeating patterns and commonalities. As Rozan mentioned, we coded them into many categories. Each interview was looked over by at least 2 researchers, and we discussed the whole process with each other and our mentors. We identified the 5 key themes that were mentioned previously, which was interpreted as through the literature of religious minoritization theme by Shabana Mir. The next slide. Okay, and moving on to our first theme, here are some quotes that we found that fell under this category. One's by Arya, who talks about, "It is my identity, it is who I am. I'm really honored to be a part of the religion as a whole." Kinza, another participant, goes on about talking about her parents telling her to take a lot of precaution, having to cover my identity. "I can't openly tell people that I'm Muslim." And May goes on to talk about how she's bicultural because she was born in America, but she comes from Palestinian roots. All 3 of these talk about how identity and religion is important. As far as Kinza goes as far as describing that she couldn't openly tell people that she was Muslim because of her safety. And that's really important in our research, as dual identity played a common role amongst all of our participants. Continuing on with religion and identity, Adam, another participant, talks about, of course, we want to try to implement it in our lives the best way that we can, despite shortcomings. He's talking about practicing his religion or praying 5 times a day. And even though he might run into problems, as many participants do, but the fact that they try and that they have the space and accommodation to do so is important. Tina talks about how it's different. Even when we move here, there are certain things like it's a different culture. You see different people doing different things that you're not used to seeing in a Muslim country. Adjusting from your homeland to in America can be difficult, especially when it comes to like forming your religious identity and your own personal identity. And then Kinza goes on to talk about having a balanced life between my religion and my social duties. A lot of participants mentioned having to balance out their faith and their American identity, as many things do contradict, but it's important for them to fit in and feel welcome, as well as hold on to their culture and their religion.
The second theme we identified was the immigration status. And we found that even though all of the people that came had completely different immigration stories, there were some underlying themes that made them all similar. And the first one was Samreen, that talked about how she had her first bachelor's in geology from back home, but that when she did come over, it did not translate. The credits did not translate over. And so she had to start from behind. She talks here and really says, I feel like I'm so behind, and I started from zero. Like education didn't carry over. And it does something when you come to a country and they don't validate your very kind of time you've put in for achieving something as big as a bachelor's degree. Now, Samreen goes on to talk about something else that is really interesting, and it is by looking at immigration from multiple views. So looking at it from how when she came, but also from when her brothers came. Now, her brothers came much earlier than she did, and that meant that they had a completely different struggle. They looked at trying to establish themselves financially and settling in. So they really had to find the very first things that come with kind of making your own place, finding a home, calling it home. And when she came, she just lived with her brothers. So that financial struggle wasn't quite her struggle, but she still had to kind of face her family and cultural barriers in order to try to get a job. And that was her main struggle. Now, something that she mentions, and that was true across all participants, is finding good education. She, as well as like a lot of parents mentioned, want their children to have these practical jobs, and I mean, their goal is to get them to be like doctors and engineers and all that. But regardless, their main priority is good education, regardless of where, or what it leads to eventually. Now, the third theme was racist targeting, and a lot of quotes were kind of heartbreaking, a lot of stories that shouldn't happen, a lot of words that shouldn't be said in a country you think is so progressive right now, in a school that you think should feel very safe. But we pulled this quote from Alyssa, and she talks about just this little incident where she was walking, going to school, and was stopped by a gas station. And there were just these people shouting these racial slurs. And that's not even like the scariest part. It comes to when they pointed the nozzle at her, indicating that they would, throw the gas at her, burning her alive just because she was a hijabi. And that by itself is just a horrible thing to happen to a person, but to happen to a young student going to school, it's unimaginable what kind of impacts that may have had for Alyssa. And that she knows now that wearing a hijab might change people's perception of you just because of that shift in your belief of wearing a head covering. Another quote we pulled is from Adam, and this is kind of disgusting because it comes from an act of a teacher, which is an educator, someone who's supposed to teach us not to do the very things that he showed in his classroom. And what he basically did is this teacher was in this classroom and he found this toy on the ground that resembled something like a grenade. And when he picked it up, he said, and I'm going to read that straight from the quote, "Huh? Where did this come from? Maybe Mr. Muhammad knows about this." And this hurt Adam. He talks about in the quote about how it kind of set a standard in the classroom, allowing everybody now to make similar remarks, making it okay to even make these type of remarks. And again, just as an educator, you have this power in a classroom wherever you go. And I think that is a clear misuse of that power you have, showing people what they can and can't say. And Adam in the quote again says, it does psychologically mess with a kid, just like it did with Alyssa before. Here also Adam mentions it. It's the after effects of what happens after you are targeted, and like what it does for your next experiences that follow.
Now to continue off, our fourth theme was hyper-awareness. Many of our students expressed that they feel that they fear their surroundings. They feel like they are always watched, like whenever they walk in a room, everyone is just staring at them. And here for an example, we have Tina, and I quote, "I always have this feeling, always have this thing in the back of my head that I might not belong or people might look at me differently. I try to be confident and know that there's bad people in every race and every religion. And then in the back of my head, I sometimes just think like, I just shouldn't be here." Next quote. And then for our second one, it's hypervisibility. For a Muslim to stand out in the community, for them to be visible, there are many ways. For female, it's the hijab. Like not all Muslims wear the hijab, not all female Muslims wear the hijab, but most of them decide to wear it. It is not, you are not oppressed to wear it. It's a choice that you make. You commit to God by wearing it, in which you cover your hair, just like this. It's a headscarf. So for many females, they expressed, like such as May, they expressed that it was a positive thing. So May here says, "When people look at me, they see my hijab and all that. Like they compliment it instead of giving me negative comments." And then we found other negative quotes as well, in which the female stated that she feels as if without the hijab, she would fit in the community more, and that she wouldn't have any negative experiences in the community, and she will be more welcome. She won't need to worry about her surroundings. And I think this all comes back from like the 9/11 and the war on terror and what our parents went through. Next quote, please. So the pressure of individuals to represent the community. Some students, such as Arya, feel that they are pressured or obligated to set a good example of an American Muslim because of the negative stigma born like from 9/11 and war on terror. Here, Arya mentions a lot of negativity is out there about Muslims. I feel like I can be a better example to many people that do have that wrong understanding. I am showing who I am, so I want that to be a good experience for someone that's meeting me for the first time. And I feel like for someone who is non-Muslim, who is like, for an example, a white man won't have to worry about, oh, he is not representing the community. He is just representing himself. But for Muslims, if someone does one wrong thing, it's the whole community is blamed for it. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, our research documents students' representation of their religious identity, the struggle of immigration for Muslim American families and how that impacts goals and experiences going to college, racist targeting incidents against Muslim Americans, and experiences of religious minorities on campus and in the community, the pressure to properly represent the Muslim community. Now, our recommendation is to see Muslim represented on campus. So as Muslims, many of us are aware of the looks we receive when we enter a room or when we are walking in the hallways. We may look different because we choose to practice our religion and choose to wear the hijab or grow a beard. But at the end of the day, we also want to feel comfortable on and off campus. For some students, not knowing about the prayer area in the student union requires them to pray in between shelves in the library. Like, I know a lot of students who had to do that before they knew where the room was located. Like for me, I transferred in and I didn't know that there was even a prayer room until we were doing this research. Being very visible makes us want to pay extra attention to how we are representing ourselves. It also forces us to be extra cautious of our surroundings to avoid discrimination and negative incidents like how Sarah experienced on the bus. And I would like to thank you all for your precious time, and that's it.